of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hawks POSTCAST, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's quick hitting local insight after every game. You can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. The Hawks POSTCAST is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. So the Hawks were in Miami looking for a little bit of revenge, and they got it tonight. We'll talk about how they were able to do it and, of course, give you our takes on the 127-115 win in South Beach. And you kept it simple. You said your take for this team was that Atlanta beat Miami at their own game.
He did, Tenitra. And listen, a lot of people might think that I might be going in the, speaking in a reference to the defense, which it feels like we kind of saw a different Atlanta Hawks team on the defensive end. Of course, I don't want to say that too loud because I don't want them to hear me. Hopefully they don't go back to those old Atlanta defensive ways. But from a bench scoring standpoint, I feel like we talk so much about so many different things. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, we haven't really talked as consistently this year as we did last year about the bench. Probably part of that is because so many guys off the bench had to kind of step into the role of being a starter, but also because they have still been pretty consistent in the NBA in terms of bench points. And that's a good reason behind why we don't mention them as much, is because they've just been so consistent. On tonight, when you're shooting the ball the way that they have, especially from the field, even from three, where you have two guys specifically between CJ McCollum and Luke Kennard, who, combine for 38 points together on their own, convert on 10 3-pointers between the two of them. And the Miami Heat is the #1 team in terms of its bench scoring, with averaging about 42 points per game. Mm-hmm. While they did get beyond their average at 45, the Hawks hit that, season mark of a high for this year at 68 bench points. So, kudos to them. I think that's great, especially having the kind of firepower offense coming off behind that the way that they did. I think we saw some good things out of Asa Newell as well, where I thought he and Khalil Ware would be a good matchup. Two younger guys that are going to be relied upon a lot for both of their respective franchises. And CJ McCollum, I wanted to make sure I mentioned this too real quick. Forgive me for getting long-winded, but CJ McCollum being one of those guys that I feel like this team hadn't had in a while. Mm-hmm. We saw some glimpses of it at one point in time, a little bit with Lou Williams, but more so that veteran leadership, that ideal leadership that Vince Carter once brought into this team. I don't think we've seen it since then. I think CJ McCollum kind of gives them that boost that I don't think that they had in quite a little while.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I definitely do. I'm seeing that leadership come out in him in different ways, and it was absolutely necessary, especially because we really haven't had Kristaps Porzingis on the court. He did shoot-arounds today, and they kind of thought he would be a go, but he wasn't. So, to have someone who's actually able to be present on the court and really have that veteran presence, that's a big deal. And in addition to what you saw from the bench, particularly CJ McCollum, as you mentioned, and Luke Kennard, also want to give a shout out to Corey Kispert, because he's been pretty solid for this team as well. Offensively, scored 13 points tonight on 5 of 13 shooting. And I think another thing that he was able to do 4 rebounds and 4 assists. So to see him just give the Hawks a bit of two-way play throughout his time, that was good. And Moge, all I asked for Moge was just give me something on defense. Like, I don't really care about your 6 points offensively. The 6 boards is what mattered to me, because that's the type of thing that helps the Hawks to keep, or helped the Hawks to keep the Heat honest. So that's what I was looking for out of them. So if we're talking about all 5, because obviously Keaton Wallace just kind of came in at the very, very end once the game was in hand, but literally the 10-man rotation, the 5 men who rotated off the bench, all contributed in some way, shape, or form. That's something that the Hawks should be proud about and excited about as well. And that's really why they were able to return the favor, which is my take for the night. After the Hawks lost by 15, when these teams met on December 26th back in Atlanta, it looked like it was a totally different box score, right? It was looking at the Heat dominating in every way, the Heat dominating from the field, from three, making their free throws, getting all the rebounds. Everything was going in the Heat's favor that particular night. I feel like that was the swing tonight for the Hawks, because when you look across the board, other than which you've already mentioned, kind of, or I wanted to mention, because you already talked about the bench. That's one area where the Hawks outdid the Heat. Also, the turnovers. The Hawks were able to keep it under double digits, keep it under 9. So I think that's a good thing. In addition, anytime you can have 9 turnovers, but just allow the opponent to have 11 points off those turnovers, that's huge. Hawks shot almost 49% from the field to the Heat's 44%. And really where that divide came, especially early on, was the Hawks hitting their threes at a clip of 42%. The Heat just 25% tonight. And that really, I think, offset things as well, in addition to even the little things. The team rebounds, 9 for the Hawks, just 7 for the Heat. Like you said about the bench, it was that all-around effort that we saw from this team in its entirety. You're looking at, from the starters' perspective, yes, you may have only had 2 starters in double digits, but when you start to look deeper into the box score of the starters, there were other places that they contributed. But again, I think the team rebounds kind of is a very telling stat, because it speaks to the fact that this was a game where the Hawks were determined to win as a unit.
I agree, Tenitra, and I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why I think that it brings up such a good point when you mention the rebounds and some of those little things they did in the front court, because they didn't have Kristaps Porzingis, which is their starting, center. They didn't have Onyeka Okongwu, who is
we thought we might,
starting center.
Yeah.
We thought that we might.
Yeah.
And just to go to show that you can win games, talk about positionless NBA and this and that and so on and so forth, and I get all of that. But Bam Adebayo is, no pushover, if you will. He's not some, tall, lanky, scrawny guy. He has bulk to him. I believe a former all-star, maybe even multiple time potentially. So I think that, you definitely got to give a lot of credit in a place where they don't win very often. This is their 144th meeting. I think in the last 18 games or something like that, the Atlanta Hawks are like 4-14 at Miami, and now picking up their 16th road game, which is the most wins in the NBA on the road. And even more so, also playing the most back-to-backs of anybody in the NBA. A lot of games being played. And to win games like this without size, I think is, definitely speaks some volume. And I think that this is a team, and again, another thing I don't want to say too loud, but certainly on the, while very slowly, I think are on the upward trajectory. I think they kind of, again, we always talk about that identity. Even when this team had a record that was better than this, we still couldn't always say we know what the identity is. I feel a little bit better about knowing the direction that the Atlanta Hawks are going in. So definitely want to give them some kudos. And it ain't just because of this win. Even in losses, I tend to feel the same way about the Atlanta Hawks.
I really like the effort that we're seeing, the team coming together. And also, anytime you have a situation where the Hawks switch gears, like when they acquired CJ McCollum, Corey Kispert, Luke Kennard, and it actually does something eventually, because I know with Luke, it was kind of like a slow burn, but he's really, really caught up. And I believe that he's met the expectations, what the Hawks needed out of him. They're starting to get out of him. But to be able to get CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert to contribute like they've been able to do so far, it's been tremendous. Well, it was a shaky start for the Hawks, but man, did they get it together early, quickly. We will talk about the turning point of this game next up. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. So whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. So if you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. So make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is also brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certification, and location. So let's say you were hiring and you wouldn't just want someone who can help, right? You'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. And that's what you'll like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your posts get seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. So for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. So take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. So DeShaun, this was one of those where the Hawks had another slow start. The Heat went up 7-2. Couple of bad defensive possessions to start the game, but then Quinn Snyder made a move, and that timeout was the turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So Quinn Snyder calls a timeout, gets the Hawks regrouped. The Hawks eventually go on a 14-4 run, and that turns into the Hawks finishing the first half up 17. And you really saw the Hawks, in my opinion, turn up the intensity at both ends of the court. And I love the fact that they were able to regroup so quickly and not just kind of linger on. I know we'll talk a little bit about the Heat putting together a little bit of a comeback there, but I really, really liked the effort. And in particular, because we didn't talk about him specifically, but one of the key factors in that was Zachary Reese-Shea, who scored 5 points and 5 boards in 9 minutes in that first quarter. So definitely I felt like the Hawks understood the assignment. Let's not play games with the Heat. This is a special night for them because, of course, they were honoring their 2006 championship team. So the Hawks understood all of the emotion that was going on in the building. Don't play games in South Beach. Let's reset. Let's get it done. And they did.
Nothing better than to crash the party for what they were trying to put together there on South Beach, especially. And don't think I forgot, I do pay attention to how they like to swag surf between the third and the fourth quarter. I pay very close attention to those little minor details too. So no, I just think that it's one of those things, Tenitra, where I've been saying it more and more this year where I'm like, coming out with the right kind of mindset. Sometimes it does take a coach to call a timeout, bring the guys in together, not necessarily sub a guy. Sometimes you do have to sub guys out and sub other ones in, to try and teach them a lesson. But sometimes it doesn't always take that. Sometimes you just call the guys over to the side, grab them up by the uniform, so to speak, slap them around a little bit, and send them back out there and get them to go out there and play some real basketball like you're capable of playing. And hypothetically speaking, that's kind of, essentially kind of like what happened. I really thought that they needed to find a way to win this game by matching the intensity, especially on the defensive side of the Miami Heat, because we know that that is kind of like their calling card on how they ultimately end up beating Atlanta when they're playing in Miami. So I thought that was one of the things. And obviously because of that defense, finding Khalil Ware and finding Bam Adebayo, they were able to do that on that run, finding a way to box guys out. Hence kind of like your point about Zachary Reese-Sachet, why he maybe didn't give you a ton tonight, to start things off with the energy, matching what Mo Gay does, learning how Mo Gay gets his minutes. Bringing that to the table, I thought was something else that was very important. And they weren't really focused on getting cute. Sometimes that's what the Atlanta Hawks tend to do. They weren't doing that. You mentioned the ball protection. 3 or 4 of those things combined is what ultimately set them up to go on the run that they did. And then even, to kind of stand 10 toes down where inevitably a run is going to come because this is the NBA. Everybody out there is professionals. The lead from 21, I think it was, or 19, somewhere in that range, ended up getting cut to like 6 single digits. Of course, that's when the Atlanta Hawks end things in the third quarter on a 19-8 run when it was 79-73. CJ McCollum scored 12 of the team's last 19 points in that quarter for the last, 5 minutes that was remaining, and Miami turned the ball over 4 times. So it was a step up on the defensive side for the Atlanta Hawks. Didn't play no games, didn't play with their food, clocked in, did the work, clocked out, got paid.
Indeed. And of course, a big mention and a big boost from one player of the game, the all-star Jalen Johnson.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
Sometimes I feel like there aren't enough accolades for Jalen Johnson. When he locks in, dude locks in. 9th triple-double of the season, 3rd in a row. His performance tonight definitely gave all-star vibes, no doubt about it. 29 points on 12 of 20 shooting from the field, 3 of 7 from 3, along with 11 rebounds and 11 assists. You gotta love what Jalen Johnson was able to do tonight, just really established himself early as well. And I love that for him, because a lot of times with Jalen, Jalen's a little bit more of like a quiet player, if you will, but his game is going to speak volumes. And of the 29-11-11 night he had 7 of those points in the first quarter, 4 of those boards in the first quarter, and 1 assist in that quarter as well. So just loved what we saw from Jalen Johnson tonight. Just another magnificent performance.
Tenitra, sometimes, when you're going into seasons such as this one with Jalen Johnson and everybody sees the promise that you kind of have hovering over you, but the questions are, how do you mentally deal with coming off of, season ending injuries and things like that, being able to keep your head a little bit, being in the gym, working out all these things and bring it to the floor. And when you now have kind of more so the target on your back, you're not surprising anybody the next year. He put the league on notice on last year, I really believe, when he took a huge step. He's taken an even bigger step now. That's really difficult to do, especially since you got a whole nother guy that's now playing with a whole nother team. You are the sole focal point for that surrounds defenses and doing their homework and making adjustments that have to stop you every single night. There hasn't been a drop off. I think that's been the most impressive part, is that there has been a level of consistency. If the only inconsistency that we've seen that I can even remember for Jalen Johnson this year is the first couple of games after there was no more Trey, it kind of had a feel for, okay, how is he going to adjust to kind of being the guy? That might have lasted for 2 games, maybe 3 at the max. And he's really just kind of gotten back to being the Jalen Johnson that we see. And he didn't just sit back and say, oh, I'm an all-star now. I got it made. I got it. People are on my side. They know what I can do. I could kind of take a night off here and there. He didn't do that. He came out, was the same Jalen Johnson, even a better Jalen Johnson. Like you mentioned, 9 triple doubles. That's second in the league, right behind Nikola Jokic. And I just love the consistency. Sometimes it's not about being X amount better or whatever. Sometimes just staying even keeled and continuing to doing the same things over and over this is the one time when doing things over and over is actually a good thing.
Yeah, and I like 2 comments before we wrap up. One was from Terry Clark 3973 talking about that with Jalen and how his ceiling, the Hawks just have to believe in that particular ceiling and what he's going to be able to do moving forward. Like, I agree. I think this is just the start of it for him. And then he talked about some potential pairings there as well, of course, in the upcoming draft, because the Hawks have some good looks in the draft. And also just want to say to Alan Brooks 9618, he said, hey, I enjoyed the post show. Both of you seem down to earth and are. Love ATL and do. And he said he subscribed, took him long enough. Hey, man, you are in the party. You came to the party. That's all we care about. And tell your friends to drop by as well, because we just like to have a good time with you guys after a Hawks game, and especially after a Hawks win. And on top of that, a win over the Heat. The Hawks Postcast is the #1 place to hang out after every game, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For more on the Hawks, head over to Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.